Hi, my name is Manuel Krogstad, and I research race and ethnicity at the Pew Research Center. The Pew Research Center is a nonpartisan, non-advocacy fact tank that conducts surveys and demographic research about American life. Today, I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the Latino population in the U.S. Hispanics are a growing, dynamic part of the U.S. population. Who Hispanics are in terms of origins, where they were born, and what language they speak is changing. Latinos drive national population growth and are a growing percentage of college graduates. There are more than 62 million Hispanics in the country today. This number has increased steadily and relatively quickly over the past 50 years, and it continues to grow. From 2010 to 2020, Hispanics accounted for 50% of all U.S. population growth, far larger than any other group. The Hispanic population is distinct in its combination of large size and fast growth. The Asian American population is growing faster, but is significantly smaller in size. Meanwhile, the white population is by far the largest racial or ethnic group in the country, and their population declined a bit over the past decade, though in general it mostly held steady. The Hispanic population is not growing quite as fast as it once was. In the 90s and early 2000s, the population grew at about 4% per year, and today it's closer to 2% per year. This reflects a big demographic trend we've seen emerge over the past 2 decades or so, since the Great Recession in 2008. And that is the slowdown of immigration from Latin America, especially Mexico. Today, the Hispanic population is growing far more due to births than immigration. From 2010 to 2019, there were 9.3 million Hispanic births compared with about 3.5 million new Hispanic immigrants. The growing US-born population has ripple effects in other areas. Hispanics today are increasingly likely to speak English. In fact, they're as likely to speak English proficiently as they are to speak Spanish at home. This trend is driven by US-born Latinos. US-born Latinos are significantly more likely to speak English proficiently than speak Spanish at home. While Spanish use has declined over the past 2 decades, a clear majority of Hispanics speak Spanish. 70% say they speak Spanish, and about half are bilingual. And our surveys also show that the vast majority of Latinos say it is important for future generations of Latinos to speak Spanish. Another big demographic trend reshaping the US Latino population is intermarriage rates. This refers to Hispanics who marry someone who is not Latino. Latinos have among the highest intermarriage rates of any racial or ethnic group. In 2019, 30% of Hispanic newlyweds married someone who is not Hispanic. Again, this trend is driven by the US born. 39% of US born Hispanic newlyweds married someone who is not Hispanic in 2019. With intermarriage rates relatively high among Hispanics, a story to emerge from the 2020 census was about the racial identity of Latinos. Most Latinos said they identify with multiple racial groups, or with a group called some other race. These were by far the 2 largest racial groups selected by Latinos on the census. This suggests many Latinos do not see themselves in the racial categories offered on the census form. This also reflects larger trends we're seeing in the country as the population becomes increasingly multiracial and some people become more interested in their racial identity. As the Latino US-born population has increased, we've seen growing numbers of Latino college graduates. The increase has been even more dramatic among high school graduates. The increased educational attainment among Latinos is a significant piece of good news. However, disparities remain. In 2020, about 21% of Latinos ages 25 and older had a bachelor's degree, and this percentage was nearly twice as high for white Americans. One major finding from our most recent national survey of Latinos revolves around racial identity. Latinos told us that their experiences with discrimination differed depending on their skin tone. Overall, about half of Latinos said they experienced at least one incident of discrimination in the prior 12 months before the survey. That share rose to 2/3 among Latinos who said they had darker skin. Some of the most common discrimination experiences Latinos reported were people acting as if they were not smart. It's worth noting that Latinos were about as likely to say they experienced discrimination by someone who is Hispanic as they were to experience discrimination by someone who is not Hispanic. This reflects the complexity of the Latino experience in the US today among a population that is diverse in many ways. Next, I want to talk a little bit about Latino workers. Our most recent national survey of Latinos found most Latino parents have struggled with childcare during the pandemic. Latino parents who work outside the home were more likely to say childcare has been difficult than Latino parents who have not worked from home. Hispanic workers are about 17% of all US workers, which is roughly in line with their share of the US population overall. However, Hispanics hold just 8% of STEM jobs in the country today. Finally, as Hispanics make gains in college completion, Latinos are a growing share of all bachelor's degree holders. The Hispanic percentage rose from 10% in 2010 to about 16% in 2018. Notably, Hispanics have earned a growing share of all STEM degrees. So, where does this leave the Hispanic population today? Hispanics are a growing share of the population. They are a growing share of the workforce. They are more likely to speak English than their parents, more likely to be born in the US as well. And they are diverse in their racial identity, with many having multiracial families. The Hispanic population today is different than the one from 20 years ago, and the population 2 decades from now will surely be different in a variety of ways.